Snow pressed itself against the tall windows of Whitcomb Hall as if the winter night wished to peer inside and witness the quiet cruelty being prepared for a single woman. Lady Marianne Hargrave stepped through the grand doors with a breath she hoped would steady her. It did not. The warmth of the ballroom hit her like a wall of judgment, perfumed, glittering, heavy with laughter that never quite reached the heart. Her gown, a dove-gray silk reworked too many times to hide thinning seams, drew eyes almost immediately. In another life she would have blushed. Now she simply lifted her chin, as any widow expected to maintain a shred of composure must do. Marianne had not come to Whitcomb Hall to be admired. She had come because she could not afford to be forgotten. Widowhood stripped a woman of her place faster than death stripped her of companionship, and she knew well that society remembered the living only if they remained useful, amusing, or scandalous. She could not offer amusement and had no wish for scandal, so she walked softly and prayed usefulness might prevail. Lady Honoria Whitcomb's voice drifted across the ballroom long before Marianne reached the crowd. Honoria possessed the kind of presence that turned any comment into spectacle. She stood near the hearth, silver-gowned, sharp-eyed, a queen of whispers, and surveyed the room with a gaze that found prey as easily as it found praise. "My word," Honoria murmured loudly enough for the nearest 10 listeners, "is that Lady Hargrave? Has she truly nothing else to wear? I fear the poor creature has resorted to stitching her gowns with hope instead of thread." Laughter rippled. Marianne felt it brush against her like cold fingers. She kept walking. The orchestra's violins tried to lift the mood with a waltz, yet the air remained tight, alert to any misstep she might make. Every chandelier sparkled with the promise of elegance. Every painted ceiling smiled down as if amused at her presence. Marianne met none of the stares, though she felt each one as keenly as a needle. She located her friend Miss Rosalind Aylesbury near a display of winter roses. Rosalind's expression warmed instantly, a gift Marianne never took lightly. "You look lovely," Rosalind whispered, adjusting a loose curl beside Marianne's ear. "None of them deserve your composure." "I would settle for indifference," Marianne replied softly. Before Rosalind could answer, the atmosphere shifted like the tightening of a drum. A murmur swept the ballroom. The Duke of Ravensworth had arrived. The doors opened, and Alastair Ravensworth stepped through with the kind of gravity that rearranged a room. Tall, dark-haired, carrying the restrained austerity of a man who understood power and rarely needed to show it, he paused only long enough for the announcing steward to declare his name. Widowed only months prior and lacking an heir, he had become the quiet obsession of every ambitious mother within London's walls. He took in the room with a single sweep of the eyes before moving forward. Conversation resumed in a flurry, fans fluttered, whispers rose like smoke. Somewhere behind Marianne, a woman sighed, "Imagine the fortune of the lady he selects." Another answered, "He will choose briskly, I assure you. A dukedom without an heir is a candle waiting to go out." Marianne turned away. Her interest in powerful men extinguished the day her husband died and left her to the mercy of legal documents she barely understood. But tonight, fleeing was not an option. Sir Edmund Hargrave appeared before she had even made 2 steps toward the refreshments table. Her late husband's elder cousin wore a smugness that required no invitation. It clung to him as naturally as his waistcoat. His thin smile curved like a blade. "Lady Hargrave," he said with faux courtesy, bowing just enough to appear civil. "What a surprise to find you here despite your circumstances." Marianne steadied herself. "Good evening, Sir Edmund." He leaned closer, lowering his voice only in pretense. "I trust you received my solicitor's letter? I am within my rights to claim the estate. Your late husband left no legal heir and no provision for an idle widow." The nearby guests stilled, scenting scandal like perfume. Honoria Whitcomb's gaze sharpened with delight. Marianne's breath tightened. "I am not idle, sir. I am grieving and managing what little remains. Not enough remains. I shall require the house before spring. Sir Edmund, please." He raised a brow theatrically. "Unless, of course, you secure an advantageous union. A woman of your age should consider such practicalities." Heat burned behind her eyes. She swallowed it. A hush spread from behind them, rippling outward as though the room itself shifted. Sir Edmund's smirk faltered. Marianne turned, and found the Duke of Ravensworth observing the scene with an inscrutable expression. He had not approached, yet his presence was close enough to silence Sir Edmund and cool the air. His dark gaze rested on Marianne, not unkindly, but with a weight that suggested he had witnessed far more than she wished any stranger to see. Sir Edmund bowed stiffly. "Your Grace." Ravensworth inclined his head once, then returned his attention to Marianne. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and controlled. "You are troubled, madam?" The simple acknowledgement nearly unraveled her. "No more than most," she managed. "Yet more than you deserve," he answered. The sound of his words slid through the room and unsettled several listeners who instantly tried to decipher his meaning. Marianne felt exposed, as though he had peeled back the layers of her composure with a single sentence. Sir Edmund recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. "Nothing of consequence, Your Grace. A minor family matter." Ravensworth's gaze sharpened. "A matter that seems to distress a lady in public is never minor." Marianne saw fear flicker in Edmund's eyes. The Duke's influence could crush a man without lifting a finger, and Edmund knew it. He bowed again, muttering an excuse before slipping away toward the safer glow of Honoria's circle. The Duke watched him retreat, then looked at Marianne once more. "Forgive the intrusion. I observed your discomfort and felt compelled to ensure you were not mistreated." "You owe me no concern," she said, though her voice trembled slightly. "I am accustomed to managing my own burdens." "No one ought to bear them alone," he replied. Before she could answer, he moved aside as another couple passed, yet his presence lingered like warmth that refused to fade. Marianne felt dozens of eyes upon her. Whispers multiplied. Rosalind approached again, but Marianne could not remain under the chandeliers another moment. She slipped through a side door onto the snow-dusted terrace. The cold struck her instantly, sharp and cleansing. Breath formed pale clouds before her lips. She wrapped her shawl tighter, grateful for the solitude. She did not hear the door open behind her, but she sensed him. Ravensworth stepped into the moonlit terrace with a quietness that unsettled the air itself. Snow glimmered over his shoulders, a faint crown of frost. He did not speak at first. He simply stood watching her, not with the hunger of society's bachelors, nor the judgment of gossiping matrons, but with the steady attention of a man who had noticed something painful and refused to turn away. Marianne looked out over the snowy grounds, refusing to face him lest the humiliation choke her. At last he spoke. "You should not be out in the cold alone." His voice was softer now, almost human beneath its iron edges. She closed her eyes as if bracing for another blow, but instead his next words struck differently, quiet, deliberate, meant only for her. "Lady Hargrave, you have been wronged tonight." She turned toward him slowly, unable to hide the sorrow trembling through her. The Duke's gaze did not waver. "And I am not yet finished with the matter." The promise hung between them, warm against the winter air, and Marianne realized this night, this terrible, humiliating night, was only the beginning. The morning after the Whitcomb ball dawned pale and glassy, the world outside still frozen by the night's cruelty. Marianne Hargrave sat by her modest sitting-room window, attempting to take comfort in the faint touch of winter light that crept over the rooftops. But the previous evening clung to her spirit like smoke. Sir Edmund's threats, the staring guests, Lady Honoria's laughter, each memory settled upon her chest with unwelcome weight. She had hardly slept, turning over the Duke's final words on the terrace. "I am not yet finished with the matter." What could that possibly mean for a man of his rank? And for a widow with no fortune to speak of? A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Her maid, Elsie, entered carrying a small velvet box tied with a ribbon the color of midnight. "This just arrived, my lady," she said, bewildered. The footman who delivered it said it was urgent. Marianne frowned. Urgent gifts were for debutantes, heiresses, and new brides, not widows trying to make themselves invisible. She untied the ribbon with careful fingers. Inside, nestled against dark velvet, lay a pair of pearl-drop earrings of such refinement that her breath caught. They glowed with the faint iridescence of moonlit water, far too exquisite for a woman in her position. As she lifted them, a small ivory card slipped free. Carved upon it was the crest of Ravensworth. Her fingers tightened. Pearls of this quality were not tokens, they were declarations, an unmistakable sign of interest, influence, or obligation. She traced the crest, feeling her pulse quicken. There were no words on the card, no explanation, no signature. Only the emblem of a man whose gaze had unsettled her more than any insult hurled in that ballroom. "Who sent these?" Elsie whispered. Marianne swallowed. "No one who should have." She closed the box quickly, as if hiding the gift could undo its meaning. Yet she could not stop her thoughts. Why had he done this? Sympathy? Protection? Or something more perilous? Possession dressed as charity? Whatever the reason, she knew she could not be seen wearing them. Not in London's merciless social world. But that conviction faltered an hour later when Rosalind arrived unannounced, cheeks flushed from the cold. "Marianne, you must come with me to Lady Embury's tea this afternoon," she insisted. If you do not show your face after last night, the whispers will multiply tenfold. Marianne hesitated. I have little desire to step back into those circles. All the more reason. Let them see you unbroken. Rosalind's determination was difficult to refuse. Still, Marianne said nothing of the earrings, at least until Rosalind's keen eyes caught sight of the velvet box on the table. What is this? Rosalind opened it before Marianne could protest. Her gasp filled the room. Good heavens! Did you steal these? Of course not. Then, who? Rosalind froze, realization blooming. Marianne. Are these from him? Do not speak it aloud. But you must not wear them. You know how society examines anything a duke does. Yes, Marianne murmured. But if I appear in last night's altered gown again, the humiliation will be worse. Rosalind paused, studying her friend's tired expression. Finally she said softly, Then wear them. Hold your head high. Let them choke on their own whispers. By the time they arrived at Lady Embury's residence, Marianne felt every inch of her courage thinning like a thread about to break. The tea gathering, though modest compared to Whitcomb's grand event, still buzzed with opulent chatter and predatory attention. The moment Marianne stepped through the door, conversations faltered. Eyes dropped to her ears. Pearls gleamed beneath her dark hair, catching the afternoon light and igniting a murmur that spread like wind through tall grass. Are those? They cannot be. The crest, surely not? Lady Honoria, who happened to be among the guests, turned with deliberate slowness. Her smile sharpened into something predatory. My dear Lady Hargrave, she said, gliding closer. How very radiant you look today. Marianne returned the faintest curtsy. You are generous to say so. More generous than others, it seems. Honoria's gaze flicked to the pearls. One must admire the boldness of wearing a duke's personal gift so openly. Several women gasped with delighted scandal. Marianne felt her pulse stumble. Honoria continued, milking the moment. Tell us, did his grace present them privately? Or did a servant deliver his admiration on his behalf? Lady Whitcomb, Rosalind cut in, if admiration were measured by servants alone, half of London would be drowned in tokens. Honoria's smile chilled. Then perhaps Lady Hargrave will explain? Marianne met her stare with quiet resolve. I have nothing to explain. And though her words were simple, they fueled the room like sparks on dry paper. Guests shifted forward, hungering for a clearer confirmation, for any hint of impropriety. A widow receiving jewels from a duke, it was more than gossip. It was potential scandal ripe for society's jaws. Footsteps approached, firm, unmistakable. A hush fell. Duke Alastair Ravensworth entered the salon. His presence silenced even the rustle of gowns. He moved with assured calm, offering Lady Embury a polite bow before surveying the guests. His gaze settled on Marianne almost instantly. Every whisper evaporated. He approached, not hurriedly, but with purpose so undeniable that even Honoria stepped aside. When he reached Marianne, he inclined his head slightly. Lady Hargrave, he said in a tone that carried to every corner of the room, I trust the items delivered this morning reached you without issue. Her breath hitched. They did, Your Grace. A faint nod. I am relieved. They belong to my late mother. They are meant only for a woman of dignity. The room rippled with shock. Honoria's face paled beneath her rouge. Marianne stared, stunned. She had not expected any explanation, let alone one that elevated her rather than condemned. Still, she forced her voice steady. Your Grace, such gifts are too great a courtesy for— I disagree, he interrupted softly. He turned then, addressing the room with calm authority. It seems I must make something plain. Several guests leaned in, breathless. Lady Hargrave is a friend to the House of Ravensworth. Any who speak ill of her speak ill of me. The words struck like thunder. Marianne's knees weakened. Ravensworth held her gaze another heartbeat, long enough to anchor her, long enough to silence every cruel whisper lingering in the air, before stepping back with a crisp bow. Only then did society begin to breathe again. But the murmurs that rose now were different. Electrified. Voracious. Already carrying a dozen interpretations, none of which Marianne could escape. An hour later, when she finally stepped outside into the cold, Rosalind exhaled shakily. Marianne, the scandal has doubled. I know. And yet, Rosalind added softly, so has your protection. Marianne looked toward the street where the Duke's carriage disappeared around a corner. The pearls at her ears felt heavier now, not from their weight but from the truth they carried. A duke's favor was never simple. And London had just witnessed the first spark of a fire she was not sure she had the strength to control. The carriage that bore Marianne to Ravensworth House should have felt like an impossible indulgence, yet it rolled through the mist-laden streets with an inevitability that made her heart tremble. She sat stiffly, gloved hands folded in her lap, uncertain whether she was being summoned for her protection or her ruin. The Duke's brief message, delivered by a liveried footman, had been deceptively simple. Your presence is required at Ravensworth House this afternoon, for matters that concern your good name. No explanation. No reassurance. Only the kind of command a man of his rank issued without imagining it might inspire dread. The estate loomed from the fog, its stone facade rising with the gravity of an age that did not permit mistakes. When the footman opened the carriage door, Marianne inhaled as though preparing for battle. She was led through quiet halls adorned with portraits of Ravensworth ancestors who stared down with unspoken judgment. The hush of the estate pressed upon her as heavily as the winter air. The Duke awaited her in the library. He stood with his back to the fire, hands clasped behind him, the glow of the flames casting hard shadows across his features. For a moment he did not speak. He simply watched her as she entered, as though studying something delicate yet formidable. Marianne could not read him. His expression was carved from restraint. "Lady Hargrave," he said at last, bowing his head with a civility that struck her as oddly intimate. "Thank you for answering my request." "I feared it was not a request, Your Grace," she replied, her voice steady despite the tightness in her chest. Something flickered in his gaze. Perhaps it was not. He gestured toward a chair near the hearth. "Please be seated." She obeyed, perched with grace but without comfort. He remained standing, as though restless or unwilling to place himself on equal footing. The fire crackled, sending sparks upward like small, desperate confessions. "I imagine," Ravensworth began slowly, "that you are curious why I summoned you." "I am," she admitted. "London already speaks more boldly than is proper regarding your gift." He exhaled, a quiet, weary sound that did not suit a man famed for resolve. "I am aware. My intention was not to draw you into gossip's jaws. Yet here I am," Marianne said, unable to keep the faintest tremor from her words. Ravensworth stepped closer. "Because I acted without considering the consequences to your reputation. That failure must be corrected." His bluntness unsettled her. "Your Grace, I wore the earrings, I played my part in the scandal." "You did only what the world forces you to do," he answered. "Survive." Marianne's breath caught. His words carried no pity, only understanding, deep and disconcerting. The kind that came from his own wounds. He walked to the tall windows, fingers brushing the velvet drapes. "I will speak plainly, Lady Hargrave, and I ask your forgiveness for what I am about to reveal." She straightened. "Very well. My political position has grown precarious." He paused as if measuring the weight of each word. "With the late Duchess's passing, I stand without an heir. And without an heir, my enemies find courage." Marianne blinked, surprised by the raw honesty of the confession. "Your Grace, surely no one would dare jeopardize." "They dare," he said quietly. "More than you know. Parliament dogs my steps with proposals intended to strip Ravensworth of lands and influence unless I secure the future of the title. My household advisors insist I must remarry. Quickly." The word settled over them like a closing door. He continued, voice low. "Every ambitious mother in London grows more insistent by the hour. Invitations flood my residence. Proposals veiled as condolences. It is suffocating." His eyes met hers. "And I loathe being cornered." Marianne understood then why the Duke of Ravensworth seemed carved from granite, why he guarded each breath as if the world might steal it. Her own voice softened. "But what does this have to do with me?" He held her gaze, unflinching. "Everything." Heat rose to her cheeks. "Your Grace, Last night," he interrupted, "when I saw you endure humiliation with dignity sharper than any sword, something within me shifted. You did not cower. You did not barter your pride. You stood alone against cruelty, and you did not fall." His voice deepened. "I cannot say the same for many in London's highest circles." Marianne looked down, overwhelmed. "I did not expect admiration from you." "It is not admiration," he corrected. "It is recognition. You are a woman who does not seek to control me, nor cling, nor manipulate. You carry sorrow without turning it into a spectacle. Such qualities are rare." He moved to stand before her. She felt the heat of the fire at her back, and the colder heat of his nearness before her. "I gave you the earrings," he said slowly, "not merely to comfort you, but because I wish to give something, anything, to a woman who had lost too much. She lifted her eyes. And yet the gift placed me in greater danger. Yes. He leaned closer, remorse shadowing his expression. Which is why you are here. There must be clarity between us. Silence stretched, taut and trembling. At last he said, Lady Hargrave, I need a wife, an heir, a future the world cannot dismantle. The words struck with the force of thunder. She rose, breath unsteady. Your Grace, I cannot. He raised a hand, halting her. I do not expect your answer today. But you must hear the truth before London poisons it. His voice lowered. If I choose you, society will sneer. They will say I reach beneath my station. They will say you only wish to secure a fortune. Marianne stiffened. I would not endure such accusations. Then listen to what I offer, he said. You would not have to endure them alone. She stared at him, searching for cruelty or strategy or foolishness, anything that might explain the impossible suggestion forming between them. What are you asking of me? She whispered. The choice to marry me. He paused, the air tightening. Not for love. Not for companionship. But for survival, yours and mine. She felt the room spin. Her pulse roared in her ears. Your Grace, my previous marriage was unkind. I fear becoming a possession once more. The Duke's expression shifted, as though something long dormant stirred. I do not want your obedience. He stepped closer, his voice a whisper. I want your loyalty, and your strength, and the promise that I may rely upon someone who does not desire my power. She shook her head, overwhelmed. And what would become of me? You would become the Duchess of Ravensworth, he said simply. Protected beyond measure. Secure. Untouchable. Her breath trembled. And in exchange? In exchange, he said, meeting her eyes with unwavering intent, you would give me the heirs the title demands. Her heart lodged in her throat. He did not touch her. But the weight of his nearness felt more binding than hands could ever be. Marianne, he said softly, her name spoken for the first time, unshielded by formality, marry me, not out of affection, out of necessity. For without such an alliance, we both stand to lose everything. The fire cracked, sending a shower of sparks upward. She did not answer. She could not. But he watched her with the steady gaze of a man who had already made a vow in the dark, and now waited for her to make one in the light. The gardens of Ravensworth Palace lay cloaked beneath a fresh quilt of snow, every hedge and marble urn softened beneath winter's quiet authority. Marianne walked the path slowly, her breath rising in fragile clouds, her thoughts heavier than the frozen air. She had spent 3 sleepless nights replaying the Duke's proposal, if it could be called that, turning each word as though she could extract its true intent. She feared accepting him as much as she feared refusing him. And yet she had asked him to meet her here at first light, determined to speak before the day could steal her resolve. Ravensworth waited near the fountain. He wore no cloak despite the cold, as though winter itself bowed to him. Snow rested on his shoulders, melting in hesitant rivulets, and his gaze, dark, unyielding, followed her approach with an intensity that made her heart stumble. Lady Hargrave, he said quietly, bowing his head. Your Grace, she answered, forcing her voice steady. I have come to speak plainly. Then we are well matched, he replied. I have never admired dishonesty even when it is offered as comfort. She drew a breath, steadying her trembling gloved hands. I have considered your offer, and I cannot marry a man who will treat me as an ornament or a possession. I have lived such captivity once. I will not endure it again. A shadow passed over his expression, not anger but recognition. I would not have summoned you into a gilded cage. Yet you asked for obedience without affection, she said. Loyalty without tenderness. Duty without freedom. His jaw tightened. Marriage for a man in my position is not a romantic venture. It is strategy, legacy, survival. And what of the woman who must bear the weight of that survival? Her voice rose, rawer than she intended. Am I to sacrifice the remainder of my life to a title? To be bound in the name of heirs? He stepped closer. If you choose to stand with me, you would not sacrifice your life. You would secure it. By surrendering my body? She whispered. The question struck between them like a blade. Ravensworth did not flinch. Yes, he said. By surrendering your body to a union that protects us both. I cannot pretend otherwise. She closed her eyes briefly, her breath catching. He had spoken the truth she had dreaded, but truth, however sharp, was better than illusion. Your honesty wounds, she murmured. I would rather wound you with truth, he replied, than comfort you with lies. Snow drifted between them, the silence deepening, weighted with choices neither wished to make. Marianne lifted her chin. Then hear my terms, your grace. I will not be a duchess in name alone, nor a vessel for your ambitions. If I am to join your household, I require dignity. A voice in the affairs that concern my home. Safety, not only in body but in spirit. His eyes softened from steel to something almost human. You would have that. And I will not be dismissed, she continued, once children are born. I will not be cast aside, labeled a mere convenience. Ravensworth hesitated, wrestling with an inner chain only he could see. Marianne, I cannot promise affection, but I can promise constancy, protection, partnership. Not enough, she said quietly. Not when the world sees me as lesser. He exhaled, a sound of surrender and restraint. Then I must speak plainly in return. He took one step closer. The snow crunched beneath his boots. Marianne felt the cold press against her skin, but his nearness warmed her like an encroaching fire. If you marry me, he said, voice low and solemn, your body will be mine until I have my sons. The word struck her like a blow. Not shouted, not cruel, but deliberate. A vow rooted in fear, duty, and desperation. She stiffened. You speak of me as if I were an obligation to be endured. No, he said, breath quickening. You are the only woman I trust not to ruin me. And that is your justification? It is my truth. She stepped back wounded. But he followed, one step, then another, until she could feel the faint warmth of his breath against the cold. Marianne, he murmured, I am a man hunted by expectation, cornered by Parliament, and tormented by those who wish to see my family name fall. I speak harshly because the world has taught me to protect what is mine with iron. If I soften, they will take everything. She swallowed, heart aching at the confession. Then what am I to you? A shield? A partner? He said fiercely. A woman whose courage steadied me when I least expected it. A woman I cannot bear to see destroyed by the likes of your cousin or London's vipers. His voice thickened. You think I wish to possess you? I wish only to anchor myself to someone uncorrupted by ambition. His words were both balm and wound. Your grace. He shook his head, stepping back as though fearing he had revealed too much. Do you think I have not asked myself why it is you, of all women? I do not know. But when I saw the world tear at you, something inside me refused to tolerate it. The snow swirled, the fountain's frozen basin glimmering behind them like a silent witness. Marianne's voice softened. I do not despise you for your fear. He looked away. Then perhaps you understand me more than most. But, she continued, I will not live in a union built only on necessity. If I agree to this marriage, your grace, then there must be more than bargains and heirs. There must be respect. There must be the promise that I am not a temporary inconvenience. His gaze snapped to hers, sudden and intense. You would have that promise. On my life. She stepped toward him, feeling the ground shift beneath her resolve. Then there is one final matter. Name it. You must give me the truth of your heart, even when it is unflattering. I will not navigate a marriage built on half-spoken fears and concealed intentions. He hesitated, then nodded. Then allow me to offer the first truth. He reached for her hands, slowly as if touching something sacred. I want this marriage, he said, voice low, because I fear what becomes of me without it. Without you. The admission shook her more than any demand. And yet, he added, I fear equally what becomes of you if you refuse me. The wind curled around them, whispering through bare branches. Marianne closed her eyes, feeling the trembling line between dread and destiny. When she opened them, she answered, Very well, your grace. I will marry you. Relief and anguish flickered across his face, mingling like shadows caught in the same breath. He bowed his head, voice barely above a whisper. You have given me more than you know. That evening, in a quiet chamber lit by winter's fading sun, a marriage contract was signed. Witnesses inked their names with reverence and a hint of scandalous curiosity. Marianne's signature trembled, but it did not falter. When the Duke took the quill, his hand remained steady, until the final stroke where something unguarded broke through. A vow unspoken, a fear exposed, and a fate sealed. Their marriage was no longer a question. It was a bargain, a promise, a storm waiting to break. Snow battered the windows of Ravensworth House as though winter itself wished to bear witness to the storm unfolding within its walls. Marianne stood in the Duke's private chambers, her wedding gown heavy with the scent of roses and candle smoke, her pulse trembling beneath silk sleeves. Hours had passed since the ceremony, hours filled with polite congratulations, veiled judgment, and 1,000 eyes measuring her worth. Now at last the world had receded, leaving only the truth between husband and wife. Alistair Ravensworth entered the room with slow, deliberate steps. The fire behind him cast fierce light across his features, carving the planes of his face into shadow and flame. He closed the door quietly, an oddly gentle act for a man capable of commanding armies of servants and silencing entire halls with a glance. Marianne lifted her chin. "Your Grace." He paused at the sound of her title, something tightening in his jaw. "We are married now. There is no need for formalities when we are alone." Her voice remained steady, though her heart raced. "Then perhaps honesty should begin now, while the ink of our vows is still fresh." He studied her for a long moment. "Very well. Speak your mind." She took one step toward him, fingers curling at her sides. "You once told me I would surrender my body until you had your sons. Tonight, I refuse to enter this marriage under the shadow of those words." He stiffened. "I told you the truth as the world requires it. And I will give you the truth as my soul requires it," she answered, her gaze unyielding. "I will not give myself to a man who sees me only as a vessel for continuation of a name." The fire cracked sharply behind them as though punctuating her declaration. He moved closer, tension radiating through every line of his posture. "Marianne, you agreed to this union." "I agreed to a union built on respect," she said. "But respect does not grow from fear. It grows from understanding." For a moment she thought he would turn away. Instead he exhaled, the sound heavy with reluctant vulnerability. "What would you have me understand?" "That I did not marry to bear heirs," she said softly. "I married because survival left me no other path. You offered safety and I accepted, but do not confuse my need with my weakness." His eyes darkened. "I have never considered you weak." "Then prove it," she whispered. He looked at her then, truly looked, and something inside him shifted like a door unbolting. The harsh lines of his expression faltered. "I spoke those words because I feared losing control of the one thing still within my grasp. The title. The estate. My family's legacy. Everything else has been taken from me." His voice cracked on the last word. Marianne felt her breath catch. "Alistair." He turned from her suddenly, pacing before the fire with a restlessness that betrayed years of restraint. "My first wife died in my arms," he said, each syllable brittle. "One moment she laughed at the notion of illness. The next she was gone. I told myself grief could be buried beneath duty, beneath power. But the truth?" He stopped, dragging in a ragged breath. "The truth is that I have been terrified ever since. Terrified of giving any part of myself that could be taken again." Marianne stepped closer, the distance between them narrowing to a breath. "Your Grace, I am not here to replace what you lost." "No," he whispered, "you are here to expose what I still fear." Snow thudded softly against the window panes. The chamber felt too quiet, too intimate, the air trembling with words neither of them had ever dared to speak. He faced her again. "When I gave you those harsh vows, I believed I was protecting myself. But today, watching you walk toward me in that gown, proud despite every cruel whisper, I realized how wrong I was." Her breath shivered. He continued, voice barely above a murmur. "I do not want your submission. I want your presence. Not because I need heirs, but because I am no longer certain I can endure this life with its shadows, alone." The confession struck her deeper than any vow spoken at the altar. She reached for his hand, slowly giving him every chance to retreat. He did not. His fingers closed around hers with an urgency that startled them both. "Then hear my truth," she said gently. "I will give you children if fate allows it. But I will not give you fear. I offer partnership, not imprisonment. If you want a wife who obeys without question, you have married the wrong woman." His lips curved into something fragile, almost disbelieving. "Marianne, I married precisely the woman I needed." Before she could respond, distant voices echoed down the corridor, agitated, hurried. The doors burst open and Ravensworth's steward entered, pale with alarm. "Your Grace, Sir Edmund Hargrave has arrived. He carries documents claiming Lady Marianne's estate and demands audience with the court." Marianne's blood ran cold. "He means to ruin me here even now." Ravensworth's eyes sharpened into the cutting steel she had seen the night they met. "No, he means to ruin us." He strode past the steward, Marianne close behind. Together they walked through the great hall, where guests whispered and servants froze mid-step. Sir Edmund stood at the entrance, frost clinging to his coat, triumph twisting his mouth. "Your Grace," Edmund said with mock courtesy. I bring legal proof that this woman. You will speak of her Grace, the Duchess of Ravensworth, with proper respect, Alistair cut in, his voice echoing across the marble. Edmund faltered. This does not concern you. It concerns everything that bears my name, the Duke replied, stepping before Marianne like a shield. And it ends now. He snatched the forged documents from Edmund's hand, scanning them with a single practiced glance before holding them aloft for the gathering crowd. These papers, he announced, are fraudulent. Signed by a solicitor I dismissed 2 years ago for embezzlement. And now presented by a man who seeks to extort my wife. Edmund paled, sweat gathering at his brow. You have no proof. I have enough, Alistair said coldly. And should you press this matter further, I will ensure you leave this city with nothing. Not title, not favor, not dignity. Gasps rippled through the hall. Edmund stumbled back, denied even the courage to argue. He fled into the snow, swallowed by the storm. Silence held for a heartbeat. Then, slowly, respectfully, the room bowed to Marianne. But she looked only at her husband. Alistair stepped toward her, his voice low enough for her alone. I cannot promise an easy marriage. But I can promise this, I will stand beside you until the world tires of testing us. Her voice trembled. And my heart is no longer afraid of you. He brushed a gloved thumb along her cheek. Not a claim. Not an obligation. A reverent touch. Then, he murmured, perhaps we may begin again. Snow swirled around the windows, soft and unburdened now. And in the heart of Ravensworth House, a bargain made in fear began, slowly, hesitantly, to reshape itself into something far stronger.